Senior Minister of State for Manpower, Koh Poh Koon, says the government can audit platform operators to ensure that higher costs of compliance are not passed down to customers. This is after a new law was passed for them to pay CPF contributions to platform workers. Now, increased costs was a hot button topic amongst the 26 MPs who had rose to speak in the debate, which lasted more than 8 hours. Nasyrah Rohim reports.
Platform companies are fully complying.
As the debate over the Platform Workers Bill stretched into its second day, MPs repeated calls for the government to ensure consumers and workers do not ultimately pay the price.
How will the minister ensure that any passing on of costs to consumers by the platform operators is done in a way that is transparent and does not inadvertently create opportunities for profiteering, as well as in a way that is efficient?
Senior Minister of State for the Manpower Ministry, Koh Poh Koon, assured members that the government will scrutinise these firms on the back end to determine if there's evidence of profiteering.
The costs incurred by platform operators on work injury compensation and CPF can also be audited. Platform work associations can work with platform operators to regularly publish these data so workers and consumers can clearly see how the costs are shared across stakeholders to counter any claims of profiteering or loading of this cost onto the workers themselves.
Dr. Koh shared that since platform operators now have to pay Medisave and contribute to their workers' CPF accounts, authorities can work backwards to determine the true wage cost. Still, he warned against being too heavy-handed with policing operators.
Algorithms may be proprietary, and regulating platform operators' use of algorithms will impose significant compliance costs and affect the economic viability of platform operators. Potential entrants to this space may also be deterred from the market due to the fear of excessive regulatory burden.
During clarifications, the leader of the opposition stood to ask.
There is a concern that for some platforms there will be an incredible flow-through of these costs to the consumers, others less so. Does the government have any expectation of how it's going to manage the situation such that platform operators, I beg your pardon, don't willy-nilly just proceed and transfer all these costs accordingly to the consumer?
I think the thing that we think will be important to guard against any excessive cost increase or profiteering will to be make sure that the sector continues to remain competitive. As long as it's not monopolistic, and when that dynamic competition takes place, each platform will have to make sure that the cost that they are prepared to flow through, whether it's to the driver or to the customers, will have to be something that remains attractive to them both. Otherwise, they will lose either the share of available labour or they will lose the share of the available market.
Dr. Koh adds that the scope of the bill will be reviewed in future to cover other emerging groups of platform workers.
For more, I'm now joined by Dr. Koh Poh Koon, Senior Minister of State for Manpower. Dr. Koh, it's good to have you with us tonight. So Singapore would be one of the first few countries to enact statutory protections for its platform workers as a distinct group from employees. Now, these workers currently make up about 3% of our workforce. So why the need for this bill?
Well, we think that this particular group of workers that resembles employee to some extent, but are also freelancers to some extent, has some flexibilities like a freelancer, but actually are under some management control from the platform operators, in a sense that they're not as autonomous as they think they are. And therefore, because of that, they have some precarity. And the precarity is in terms of not having the same kind of employment benefits that employees have today, in terms of retirement adequacy, in terms of ability to afford housing, simply because they don't get CPF contribution. At the same time, because they ply the road so frequently and they're exposed to the risks on the road, they're not covered under workplace injury compensation. So from those perspectives, we think we need to level up on the kind of coverage to protect them from the vulnerability. And one of the aspects of doing that is also to make sure that they get some representation. So the Platform Workers Association can speak on behalf of these workers to make sure that any issues that they face with can have a level kind of conversation with the platform operators.
One of the main concerns surrounding this bill, though, is who is going to end up bearing the increased costs? Is it the platform operators, or is it the workers, or even the consumers? So how will the government ensure that the increased costs imposed on the platform operators and through the government support will not be passed on to the workers and the consumers of the services?
Broadly, I think most stakeholders, whether it's the workers, operators, and the consumers, believe that all of us can play a part to strengthen the social support for these workers. So in a sense, then every stakeholder must bear some of the cost, whether it's the operator, the drivers, or the consumers themselves. But to make sure that the cost is not unduly loaded on one particular stakeholder, whether it's the drivers, the workers, or the consumers, we need to make sure there's a competitive market so that if the operators should actually load the cost on one particular stakeholder, then the person has a choice to switch between the different ad platform to make sure that with competition, we can keep the price competitive.
We heard earlier in the story that the costs incurred by platform operators can be audited to counter claims of profiteering. How is the ministry intending to operationalize this?
Well, what we can do is work through the platform worker associations so that they also can have the negotiating power to work with the operators to talk about how much cost is spent on the protections for the workers or for the CPF contributions. And some of these costs that they can work together with operators can be published on a regular basis so that consumers and workers can have transparency on how these costs have been passed through.
It is a landmark bill, Dr. Koh, but could there be the unintended effect of incentivizing platform work or the gig economy over formal employment?
Indeed. Look, today, without some of these protections, the workers themselves are already in this space. And I think what we need to do is to make sure that the basic protections that are given to working people in terms of mitigating their financial costs of injury at work and also retirement adequacy should be provided for them as a basic right. And we're just trying to level them up against what other employees are actually enjoying today. So I don't think that the act of doing this will necessarily be an incentive for them to be entrenched, because we're also rolling out other forms of programs to help them pivot and move on to other employment opportunities should they choose to as well.
Okay, and some of the concerns that are linked to transparency and trust in platform apps and discrimination against workers. How is the government helping to allay these concerns?
I think the key thing is to give legal representation to these platform worker associations, and that allows the association to aggregate some of the concerns that the worker groups may have, take this up with the respective operators and discuss on a one-to-one basis, because each platform operator has a different business model and the concerns may be different. And in terms of cost transparency, I think it's a matter of really figuring out what they spend the money on, and if you can publish those data, then transparency between the workers and consumers will be able to discern where the cost really goes to.
And the nature of this sector is rapidly evolving, Dr. Koh. And you've assured in Parliament that the government will certainly review the scope of the bill in the future. So what are some possible areas that MOM is exploring in expanding the scope of this bill?
It's premature to say what other sectors will be involved, because today the sector is evolving rapidly. What we're trying to do is cover 93% of gig workers that are in the platform space, and they are mainly concentrated in the ride-hail and the delivery sectors. So this being a landmark bill, we're trying to roll it out and see how it works in this space first. And if other kind of sectors enter into the platform economy in a scale that is significant enough to involve a lot of workers, and if their income is precarious, we could well decide to include them in the future iterations of the bill.
And earlier you were talking about the bill providing platform workers with representation in union-like associations. So how will the workers be better able to negotiate for their interests through this platform specifically?
Yeah, so the association can decide in collaboration with a particular operator what areas of interest that they can mutually land on. Because each different operator has a different business model. And the concerns between what the workers have with one operator could well be different compared to another operator. So we leave the scope open for both parties to negotiate on what they want to discuss about. And I think that's the best way to, rather than have a one-size-fits-all that may not meet all the needs of the different operators and workers.
Dr. Koh, we appreciate you coming into the studio with us tonight. Thank you very much for speaking with us. That was Dr. Koh Poh Koon, Senior Minister of State for Manpower.